On the left-hand column up there, you can see what your cuts are. You're going to ASD, plus or minus cutting back the coronary sinus. I almost always cut back the coronary sinus some to make sure that the ASD is large enough. Then you cut the MPA. The PDA is ligated when you go on, but you cut that out along with the coarctation. Open the arch, cut back on the pulmonary artery, and then make a counterincision for your interdigitating anastomosis. So I'm going to show you the interdigitating technique. I'm not going to sew everything. I'll do some interrupteds, and because it's a lot of sewing, it takes a long time to sew all this. But you'll get the sequencing down in terms of what we do. So here you can look at the first thing in the ASD. Take out the ASD. Usually the coronary sinus is sitting about right here, and usually I'll drop my scissors down in the coronary sinus and cut that like that back, and now you have a much bigger ASD. In terms of transecting your pulmonary artery, usually you have to mobilize tissue here, and then you can cut right at the orifice of the right pulmonary artery or right on top, and you want to look inside and make sure you're not cutting the pulmonary valve. Obviously that seems obvious. The other thing is you want to angle a little bit leftward, and there's plenty of PA there, so see how I'm angling towards the head, and then come around the back without compromising the orifice. And then we will transect the ductus, which theoretically is tied. And then you want to take out the coarctation. And you have to be careful here that you don't disconnect the LSVC, because sometimes you can, if depending upon the configuration. Cut out all the ductal tissue. And then I kind of have a look at this and see whether or not there's squiggly tissue here still. Usually there's still a little squiggly tissue, and you come around and trim a little bit off, kind of like this. And then you can make your first, your counterincision for your interdigitating anastomosis. So why the interdigitating anastomosis? If you think about ductal tissue, there's a rim of ductal tissue all the way around, and you try to take it out, but sometimes there's a little bit left. So in an interdigitating anastomosis, you cut posteriorly, which opens up that rim, and you make a counterincision anterolaterally as well. So you've split that potential residual rim of ductal tissue, and effectively you eliminate recurrent coarctation. It's about 1% or something, and it's a technical problem when it occurs. And then opening the arch. Let me just slide in here. Can you hold that right there? Hold on, thanks. And I move anteriorly as I get partway up the ascending aorta, because if you stay immediately on the side, you can compromise the left coronary that's right there. And you also want to know exactly where the right coronary orifice is, because if you want to get close to them but not into them. Sometimes it's widening a little bit right there, which is nice to get into. See how that's starting to get a little bit wider? But you can see how you could potentially compromise the left or the right. Then I look inside, kind of let this sit naturally, and see where that abuts it. So right there is where it abuts it, and you want to look inside here, and you can see that it's anterior to the commissure. Sometimes it's posterior to the commissure. You cut back usually across the sinotubular junction so that those two can come together in a side-by-side kind of V kind of way. Just because this stuff is stiff, I'm going to take a little bit out. So that's all your cuts. And then we start sewing. So the first sewing that I do is to put the DKS together. And just start inside, kind of right next to the apex. And then you can kind of come inside and open it up with your pickups like this. Let's get that out of the way. And one of the things you can do once you get this together is you can look down inside like this and see the orifices of both coronaries to make sure that you haven't compromised them in any way. Now some people will do interrupteds and not make this counterincision. That's fine as well. A lot of people have moved to this side by side because you seem to get a really nice, generous anastomosis for the DKS. At the end of the operation, we always look and make sure there's good flow there. So I'm going to, just for sake of brevity, I'm going to tie this. I do tend to tie these, but I'm going to cheat and not tie it the way we normally would. Okay, cut that. Let's tie this one. It's hard to see on these models, but as you can see, that opens up that base of that ascending aorta really well when you use this technique. It's just a color contrast issue. Okay, do we have another? Same thing, this stuff collapses, so I'm going to just take a little V out so it can sit in there the way we want. And I'm not going to put all these stitches in, but you start just adjacent to the base. And then usually there's a little kind of a corner right here that fits down inside there nicely. Let's put a couple ties here and just do a few interrupteds. And you kind of stitch all that back wall together. Okay, cut that. Let's put one more over here. This is all run. I'm just doing a few interrupted so you don't have to watch me sew everything, and we'll get through this a little faster. Okay, cut that. Okay, so now you need to make one more incision, which is your counterincision for the interdigitating anastomosis. So the interdigitating anastomosis is going to add 10 or 15 minutes to your case, but you get rid of the recurrent coarctation. So the back wall's done. You come to the anterolateral position here, and you want to go the diameter of the proximal descending aorta, or just more than diameter. And then I trim a little corner off each of these here, and then you're ready to start doing your patch. So let's talk about the patch. I do a build it as you go kind of patch. So there's all kinds of ways of doing patches. You can do a simple triangle that's kind of shaped like this and comes up like this. Most of the time the patch I do looks something like this. We take this edge off here. You get a bit of a shape something like this. So it looks like almost like a shark's fin, big comma. That's not drawing on there, but it's a big long tail. So we've marked this up. We're going to build a patch as we go. Let's see what it looks like when we're done. Get some estimate of it. You have the 60C one?
Yep.
I'm going to take some of this off just so it's not too big. easier to work with. Okay, so typically start just adjacent to the toe, to the right of the toe down here. Can we rotate it this way a little bit?
Towards you.
Yeah. Perfect. So what we do in real life, need a little more light in there. Perfect. Okay, so let's take that patch down inside now. Now, let's just look at this patch for a minute and think about it, because it's going to give you a chance to see how we work on this patch and why. So we've sewn the tone down. You can see that what we would need to reconstruct is this big long thing here. So that's a very, very long edge. And that's what it's going to fold over like that. See that? We could even mark that right now, that's where that cut's going to be. This one, so you have to fill this corner right here, so you need this little bulge to fold over and fill in that corner right there. It's a little bit wide, so we know we're going to have to narrow that a bit. But that's kind of what you're looking at, is how does this fold like this without kinking. So this material's a little stiff, but those are kind of the things you're thinking about. So I'm going to take big, massive jumps so we don't take forever sewing, but enough to kind of tack it in place and give us an idea of what we need to do. So you want to bring this up to about the innominate. Okay, so we're up to about the innominate. Now you can decide how long this patch is going to need to be. So we'll fold it over. This is a Tom spray maneuver, where you get to there and you put your little cut at the top of where that's going to need to be. Now let's work on the other side a little bit. We said that's going to be too wide. It is a little bit too wide, so I'm just going to take some of that out right now so we don't get in trouble from it being too wide. And let's swap sutures. Same thing, I'm going to do big massive jumps here. But hopefully equivalent massive jumps. And the next important place where you make another cut is up in the corner. So when you get to the corner where it changes from the arch to the ascending aorta, is a very important place to make a cut so it doesn't kink. So that's supposed to be to that, to that. Hold this like this. So you just kind of hold it in position. And you can see that it's too wide there and that this needs to be cut along here. So we'll make that cut along there to that corner. And that's a key cut to keep it from kinking. We haven't put all this together, so I'm going to pretend like it is. Okay, so now where's the other pickups? Now you've got your basic arch built, and all you've got to do is fit the PA inside of there. So you can see where that PA wants to sit. Put a mark right there. And you know where this cut is here because you made it already. And now you've got enough sewn to know where this cut needs to be. So all you have to do is make your cut for length and then cut down to where you've marked the tip of the PA is going to go and connect your cut here to where that tip was. So that does not look anything like what you thought it was going to look like, right? But there's your artery construction. So we'll whip that around with big jumps, and I'll come around and help you guys make the cuts if you want. Big, huge jumps. Oops. Bring that up to the corner here. Relax that a little so we don't stretch it. Yeah. Good. And then let go of that. So that comes down in here. Comes to here. And that should wrap around the top. Okay. So this strategy produces not a long, narrow aorta, but a wider, shorter type of approach. And you can, you can reconstruct these in different ways. But this is the way I've I kind of like it wider to make sure that it's not going to be obstructive. Oh, this will take 2 or 3 more bites and we're done. Okay, that's your Norwood. Anybody have questions? And you can look at this, you can see it's a non-obstructive arch. It's got a curve. So let's take it out. Let's look at what the patch looks like.
Yeah.
Compared to the beginning.
This is what you cut yesterday, so that's probably what we started with.
So here's the patch compared to a rough estimate. So this was more pointy, but you've got that long tail. So this is the underside. The outer side is much longer. All right?
Great. So
But you can have successful artery constructions with the patch looking a little different than that. Some of them will look more like this. And some of them, depending upon the particular anatomy, may not have as much of a bulge right there. But they all kind of have a long tail on them. All right?
Great.
So if you look, just to remind you, the most important point probably is making sure your outer curve is long enough. It's really long compared to what you think it's going to be. So whatever that left-hand curve is, that's the long one. The other side you can shorten and make it as you go.